You probably think you recognize someone by their face. You see them. Your brain looks at their face, and somehow you know who they are. But what if your face is not the only thing your brain is looking at? Imagine you are walking down the street. Someone calls your name from behind you. You turn around. You already know who it is. You have not seen their face. You have not checked their clothes. You have not even looked at them. You just heard their voice, and somehow your brain went, "Oh, it is them." But it gets stranger. Sometimes you can recognize someone just by the way they walk. You see a person from far away. You cannot see their face clearly, you cannot hear them, but something about the way they move feels familiar. You keep watching, they get closer, and then you realize that you were right. Your brain had already made the decision. You just had not consciously caught up with it yet. This happens all the time. You recognize your friend's footsteps outside your room. You recognize your mother's voice from another room. You recognize a friend from the way they say your name. You can even recognize someone from their silhouette. Your brain does all of this without asking you for permission. So how does it actually know? A person's identity is not sitting on their forehead like a name tag. There is no little arrow above your friend's head saying, "This is your friend." Your brain has to figure it out. It uses a face, a voice, a movement, a memory, a situation. Sometimes it uses tiny details that you could not even explain. And somehow, all of those details come together. Your brain turns them into one simple conclusion. I know this person. And that ability is much older than your phone. It is much older than photographs. It is much older than cities. It is much older than written names. In fact, your ancestors needed this ability long before humans had any of those things. Because thousands of years ago, knowing who was standing in front of you could be extremely important. Imagine waking up in a small prehistoric camp. There are only a few dozen people around you. You know most of them. You know their faces, you know their voices, you know how they walk, you know who usually helps, you know who gets angry quickly, you know who can be trusted. And then one morning, you see someone unfamiliar approaching from a distance. You do not know their name. You do not know where they came from. You do not know what they want. But your brain is already asking questions. Who is that? Have I seen them before? Do they belong here? Should I approach them or should I stay away? And suddenly, recognizing another human is not just a social skill. It becomes a survival skill because your brain does not only want to know what someone looks like, it wants to know who they are. And that is where things get interesting because your brain does not store people like photographs. It stores patterns. And those patterns can be surprisingly detailed. Think about someone you know really well, maybe your best friend. Now imagine seeing them from across a crowded street. You probably recognize them almost instantly. But what exactly did you recognize? Their face? Probably. But not only their face. You might notice their height, their posture, the way they move their arms, the way they hold their head, the way they walk. You might even recognize the way they stand still. That sounds ridiculous, but your brain is very good at noticing things like this. You do not consciously analyze every detail. You're not standing there thinking, "Interesting, the angle of their shoulders matches my previous observations." Your brain does not work like that. It simply gives you a feeling. That is them. And this is one of the strangest things about human perception. Your brain can process information without giving you the full explanation. It can notice a pattern before you understand what the pattern is. That is why you sometimes recognize someone and cannot explain how. You just know. But faces are especially powerful. Human beings are unusually interested in faces. Look at a baby. Give it a random object. Then show it a face. The face gets attention. Humans are naturally drawn toward faces. We look at eyes, we look at expressions, we look at tiny changes in the mouth. We look at whether someone looks happy, angry, frightened, or suspicious. And we do this extremely quickly. Because a face is not just a face, it can tell you what another person might do next. If someone suddenly looks frightened, you pay attention. If everyone around you looks toward the forest, you probably look too. If someone you trust smiles at you, you relax. If someone unfamiliar approaches while staring at you, your body may become slightly more alert. You do not need to consciously tell yourself to do these things. Your brain has been practicing this for a very long time, and there is a reason for that. For most of human history, your world was filled with other humans, not hundreds of strangers. Usually a much smaller group. People you depended on. people you slept beside, people you hunted with, people you shared food with, people who could protect you, and people who could also hurt you. So knowing who was who mattered. A familiar face could mean safety. An unfamiliar face could mean uncertainty. And uncertainty is something the human brain takes very seriously. But there was a problem. Your ancestors did not always have a clear view of someone's face. Sometimes it was dark. Sometimes there was fog. Sometimes someone was far away. Sometimes you were hiding. Sometimes you could only hear them. And that is where another ability became extremely useful. The ability to recognize someone without seeing their face. You probably know the experience. Someone you know calls you. You answer without thinking. You already know who it is. You did not need a photograph. You did not need their name. You heard their voice. Your brain recognized a familiar pattern. A person's voice contains information. The pitch is different. The rhythm is different. The speed is different. The way they pronounce certain words is different. Even the tiny pauses between words can become familiar. You probably do not notice most of these details, but your brain does. That is why you can sometimes recognize someone while your eyes are closed. You might be lying in bed. Someone walks into the room. They say one sentence. And you know exactly who it is. Your brain does not need a complete picture. It can work with a fragment. And that would have been incredibly useful for our ancestors. Imagine sitting around a fire at night. You cannot see very far beyond the flames. The forest is dark. You hear footsteps. Your brain immediately becomes interested. Then you hear a voice. Suddenly the situation changes. If it is someone you know, you may relax. If it is someone unfamiliar, you pay more attention. That tiny difference could matter. And this is where something important happened in human evolution. Humans became extremely good at identifying individuals, not just species, individuals. Your brain does not simply think, that is another human. It can think, that is Sarah, or that is my brother, or that is the person who helped me yesterday, or that is the person I should probably avoid. The face gives you one clue. The voice gives you another. The movement gives you another. The context gives you another. And your memories provide even more. Your brain combines them. Then it produces something that feels incredibly simple. Recognition. But there's another strange thing about this. Your brain can sometimes recognize someone even when the information is incomplete. You can see your friend wearing a hood. You can see them from behind. You can hear them for only a second, and you still know. Why? Because your brain is not searching for a perfect copy. It is searching for a match. It is asking whether the information in front of you is similar enough to something already stored in your memory. And that leads to a much bigger question. Where did humans become so good at this? Why would evolution care so much about recognizing individual people? Because your brain was not just learning to recognize people. It was learning who to trust, who to fear, and who to remember. And that changes the way you understand recognition completely. Part 2 is where we get into it. See you in Part 2.